Welcome to the Edifice Complex, the property design and development podcast. Let your hosts Adam Muggleton and Robert Bean keep you up with who is innovating and doing great work, perspective on the adjacent possible, and challenges to the status quo.
Welcome to the Edifice Complex. I'm Robert Bean, your co-host and unofficial mediator, here with my colleague, official and always agitated friend in Yoda, most everything to do with buildings, Mr. Adam Muggleton. Say hello, Sir Muggleton.
Hello there. So we're back in my wheelhouse now. International people doing international things.
Yes. Today's guest earned his Bachelor of Science and Master's in Mechanical Engineering, and he's been doing his postdoctoral research work at really some of the best institutes around the world. Eindhoven University, Aalto University, Berkeley Education, the Alliance for Research in Singapore, and today he's a research fellow at the National University of Ireland. Is that right, Asit?
Currently, I'm moved to Cork, so it's University College Cork.
Okay, well, there we go. So, our guest today is Asit Kumar Mishra. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Robert, and thanks for having me on the show.
Yeah, you bet. Asit, you and I first met battling the forces of evil during a worldwide pandemic. You, like many of the engineering scientists around the world, understood that the airborne nature of particles, which include pathogens. You found utility in a document that I had worked on in creating safe spaces in homes, basically isolation rooms, how you could take your home and identify a room or several rooms and turn them into isolation spaces so that people that could share the same
infections within the home.
Yeah, and you took that, you saw utility in it, turned it and wrote it for a publication in India.
Yeah, so it was written for kind of public-faced approach, reaching out to general people in India. And we wrote it with someone who was on ground in India, Aditi, if I remember, and she was active on the ground. And her background is just from raising awareness amongst people and her own struggles with her parents, keeping them safe during the pandemic. So that was an interesting piece.
Yeah, well, in that time, so with that article, those resources and the other ones that came out during that time, we helped thousands and thousands of people around the world to be able to occupy spaces with their loved ones that maybe had to isolate for a time being, and that was a huge thing. So aside from doing your superhero work, you've been studying people and indoor environments and leading the charge in human-centric design. So why don't you tell our listeners how you found yourself in Ireland researching people and spaces?
How far back should I go? So, after my undergraduate degree, which was in India and IIT Kharagpur, so that's one of the sort of top engineering colleges in India. And so there you had the idea that the next step would be possibly a master's or a PhD in university. And at that point of time in India, so that was in 2006. So in that point of time in India, the prime target country would be US. So people weren't really looking to go to the EU or Australia or places, so US universities. So I did my master's in the US at University of Pennsylvania. And that was an interesting period because that's 2008. So you guys know what happened in 2008. And so suddenly you're out of the funding to complete a PhD. So I did my master's, and then I was for a year or so, I was working on data analysis. So that was in 2008 and 2009. So that was very early days of preparing reports and doing data analysis before all the AI fancy stuff was in. And it was paying reasonably well. So for a moment, I was thinking I might stick with it. But then that year, because of the market crash also, the number of H-1B visas were also limited. So that didn't get through. And so they're basically like without trying to extend one more year on basis of the master's degree, I came back to India. And when I came back to India, I started teaching in a college in my hometown. And there I felt that, okay, I do want to continue in this kind of academic environment. So if I want to do that, I should get a PhD. So I kind of went back to my institution, like my alma mater from undergraduate days. I kind of started my PhD there. While doing that, so one of the topics that we're initially probably thinking of looking at refrigeration systems. So like my boss, my PhD supervisor, he does a lot of work with like transcritical CO2 based systems. And so I might have followed on, like that was one of the pathways I might have gone through. But then I was looking at kind of thermal comfort and what are the, like historically how buildings been designed and set point, their contribution to energy use. And then at that point, so you have it's 2000, this is like 2011 or so, 11, 12. So at that point, then you already have had the ASHRAE 884 out. So adaptive thermal comfort is a thing codified in the standard 55, the 2004 version. And so you also have the EN 15251 speaking about adaptive thermal comfort. So I said, okay, let's look at kind of an atypical situation, university classrooms in a hot climate of India. And so that's where the journey began to look at people and the thermal environments. And then gradually, we set out data center and urban, where I started looking more at people. So where we looked at sleep and how it's impacted by ventilation and thermal environment. We also looked at how people in the hospitals, specifically nurses, they deal with the thermal transitions that they have to undergo as part of their everyday work. Worked there a bit, worked in Singapore a bit. So these are all kind of heading more and more towards becoming more and more people-centric than system-centric. So kind of delving into the domains of psychology and evaluating perceptions.
Yeah, and that's sort of where we're seeing now, if there's a motive energy moving the industry, it is IEQ. And I think for those listening, this is 2025. We're in, what is it, October still?
Yeah.
I can't. Bill McQuaid, who's our current ASHRAE president, his theme for the 2025-2026 year is healthy buildings. And of course, IEQ is a big part of that. And, Asit, we saw each other actually in Montreal a few weeks ago. But that was the 2025 IEQ AIBC ASHRAE co-hosted program. But that was just one of, I think, 6 IEQ conferences that were going on at the time. And even prior to that conference in Montreal, a group of our industry colleagues actually were at the United Nations making an argument for indoor air quality. So this year, there's been just this massive mode of energy moving towards that. And I think that we'll look back at this time and go, this was a pivotal time in the world of architecture, property development, engineering, where we started to recognize, as they did back in the day, the dead people, the times of Vitruvius, right? All of these ancient civilizations that placed a lot on vernacular architecture and the occupants, that went away. And then, of course, we're in modern times here, but we're going to come back to that. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think the first science, as I think you would also agree, came just like later part of 2020, when people started getting interested in indoor air quality and how it affects health. So then there was kind of a momentum through 2021, 2023. So you will be hearing a lot about filtration, CO2 monitoring in classrooms, in office spaces. And following that, there was quite a bit of investment that happened in North America for school infrastructure, for office infrastructure, for improving ventilation, filtration in those buildings, improving air quality. at least hopefully. And same thing happened in the EU as well. So, and several documents, boards of practice came out, which were focused on IEQ. And so I guess this is kind of building up on all that momentum, and thankfully that wasn't entirely lost. At least a year back, I would have said that the momentum has been lost. And, so this year we're seeing that there is a back, seems to be like things are back on track. And hopefully that carries through.
I mean, Adam, you probably have thoughts on this where some pivotal moment in time, where those with a vested interest in it go, this is an opportunity, but then as soon as it fades, because people have no memory.
This is a problem, right? We're like goldfish. Oh, look, there's a rock formation. I'll swim through that. Oh, look, there's a rock formation. I'll swim through that. No, I think when you look back, hindsight is 2020. I think the interest in IEQ, you have to give it to LEAD. I think they generated that personally, right? I mean, ASHRAE have been interested in it as a research topic for a while, but I would say the LEAD certification program, and I'm no fan of that, but they did popularize it as a topic, right? Then it sort of ebbs and flows, and we have COVID, right? And then there's the update on ASHRAE 55, right? But really, we do have this, people get interested in it, and they don't get interested in it, right? Depending, I think that's also a function of how well the economy is doing, right? So when the economy is doing great, you're building AAA office, everyone's, well-being, I want to, living wall in my head.
Right.
But the reality is, I think, and I'll throw this out to you guys as a sort of like IAQ people, how do we get this like embedded into building code? Right? How do we get, for example, CO2 as a proxy to manage outside air?
Mm-hmm.
Anyone?
Well, that is the challenge, right, Asit? I mean, you think, like going back to your comment there about LEAD, and I'll follow through on your question in a second here, but LEAD did have it, but again, the practitioners using LEAD, it was just the tip of the iceberg. Like they didn't really understand the fundamentals, and a lot of them was just there to check boxes. And I think back on ASHRAE 55, that's actually one of the reasons why we dropped the graphical method, because people were using the graphical method like a dartboard. As long as the dart ended up in the comfort zone, then they got the check mark, right? They didn't have to do the math or do the assessment. So it was very much, it was just lip service, really, is what it was. Yeah. And then WELL came along, and WELL actually had been in existence, running a parallel path with LEAD, but at just a smaller level, right? But they were doing work with the Mayo Clinic, and it wasn't until I think WELL came along, and then other programs, Living Building Challenge and some of the other ones, where they started to say, well, this is not just lip service. Like you have to physically do some mathematics here to do some assessments and then be in compliance with the standards. So I think, like, to answer your question, how do we get that? Like, that is the holy grail, is the building codes. And again, I said that you're more from you have an international perspective here, but certainly here in North America, codes are minimums, they become maximums because we live in a free market system. So the market will determine what the maximum they're going to do. Yeah, you have all these peripheral programs, but what was it? Jerry Udelson. I don't know, Asit, if you know who Jerry Udelson is. Yeah. He really is sort of the godfather of LEAD. Like he was one of the founders of it, and we had him on the program, I think twice now. Said that, and at least on his radar screen, there's over 600 building programs around the world. And that doesn't account for all sort of the regional programs, the municipal programs. Like those are the main ones. And they've not been able to change the codes. So the codes, that is, how do we get code officials? And of course, ultimately, these are government officials, government representatives that say, okay, well, minimums have to change. How do we do that? I don't, like Adam, you've said this over and over and over again, and I'm so on board with that. And then it's the power of the people. And we have to be able to get the populace to stand up, as they had with the automobile industry and other industries, and say we're fed up. Asit, what's your thoughts on that? from an international perspective, how do we, different countries have different processes, but how do we get these documents that guide buildings to include compliance with the environmental standards?
I think I am with you there. Like it's kind of getting awareness amongst the people and getting them. That would be the grassroots approach. I think that we have tried the top-down approach and it hasn't really worked out. But even for an example, you have certain codes in certain countries which are not really put into practice or validated or verified because no one knows. Like in Ireland, you have a Health and Safety Authority Code of Practice, which says that employers need to ensure that a workspace, the CO2 level should ideally be under 800. If it is frequently going over 1,000, they have to monitor and figure out what's going wrong and fix it. But no one really knows about it. There is no focus on it. The people who are supposed to be impacted by it, they are not aware of it. So no one really, like if you're not aware of your rights, then no one is going to do anything for you. So I guess at a grassroots level, people need to become more aware and like hoping that it's a really free market. Then if the consumer wants it, that could drive a change as well. I guess like we're talking about getting things codified, but we want things codified because we want them to be put into practice. But I mean, that is another way about it. Like if you are getting a apartment or a home built and you insist that I want those things, and then the contractor who's building it for you should ideally agree with that situation.
Adam's grinning because
good. That bird should be banned. It's basically it's a complaint ultimately, right? I should be married to Beyonce. I'm not. Last time I checked, it's
what?
So I agree with you. I always hoped that green building certification didn't do this, but I thought it might. And then I was hoping going through. Let's talk about the C word. No, Australia. That's not what you think. COVID. I always thought COVID might change the attitude towards indoor air quality. And, promote DOAS and like outside air control based on like, CO2, for example. Right? And it hasn't happened because, COVID is now starting to fade in the memory and no one's screaming for it, right? Unless people ask, you don't get it.
You know what I have even heard, like it did for a minute there, like let's say a couple of years it did. And then it has kind of, so it has, the pendulum has swung the other way. Now, like I have heard this from like, I do a series for RT Brainstorm, so which is like a popular science publication in Ireland. And then I talked with their editor and so he has a generally good perspective about what people are thinking. So he said that, yeah, you can talk about air quality, but right now, since people associated it with COVID, people do not really want to hear more about air quality because that reminds them of the pandemic. And so that's not a good association. So somehow that has come back to kind of work negatively for us.
That's interesting.
So fear is not a motivator. I always thought it was. That's how my school life went.
Yeah, but because like the immediate fear, the acute fear phase is over. Like people are not dying on the streets. You do not have refrigerator trucks in front of malls. So that's like once that phase is over, people are okay. Like that's something. There's a bump in the number of deaths in the background. I'm not dying. People I know immediately are not dying. So
they just become emotionally fatigued to the story. Like they just don't want to hear anymore. We're done. We're through it. Yeah, people are still.
I'm going to be a bit philosophical here, and so you might know, like by birth I'm a Hindu. I don't practice anymore, but I do still have like philosophically there are a lot of connotations there. So Hindus believe in rebirth, right? And so one of the concepts in rebirth is that you forget all the memories of the last birth. And why is that done? Because that saves you the emotional trauma. So I think even in the same birth, we try to do that. We try to prevent everything that is potential emotional trauma and then try to move on. Like it's every day you are getting born again, like with an attitude then, okay, what happened yesterday is not going to happen to me tomorrow or today, or what happened to my friends yesterday is not going to happen to me today. So how do I move on past those traumatic? memories. And that's a bit kind of protective mechanism, but sometimes it's not very
Wow.
good when thinking of long term.
That's the human condition, right? So this is
Yeah.
So what we're talking about here is the need for a top-down approach, right? So if it's not going to be pulled and demanded by aggregate demand, then you're looking at how do we make it a code thing, and it's a top-down approach, right? Now to get into the code, I've never really understood what drives building code, right? Normally someone has to die horribly, then they go, you know what, we should look at that, and then they change it, right?
Yeah, structures and fires. That's what,
Yeah.
that's what's driven codes. And oftentimes the code committees are populated by individuals who have maybe an architectural background or a civil background, or they're fire experts. But indoor environmental experts on a code committee, I don't even think you can get a card. You can't even become a member of the club.
And that's like trying to spot a snow leopard in a snowstorm, right? It's just not there.
And so there has been over the last several decades, though, studies looking at economic impacts of poor indoor environments. And the ones that I'm familiar with, particularly, were U.S., the General Service Agency, the U.S. government's.
Yeah, that's
and
a
they're
big landlord. Yeah.
huge. I think they're the country's largest landlord, if I remember correctly.
Yeah,
Statistically,
them and the military have this sort of running sort of like gun battle about who's the biggest, but they're just enormous. The numbers are gargantuan.
yeah, right. So they've looked at the consequences of having poor environments, and they have made changes in some of their buildings and have done studies and looked at the improvements. So, and I think, Asit, like the colleagues that you are rubbing elbows with, the Powell Wagakis of the world, and the other individuals that know this stuff, or at least have access to the research work or are doing research work. Like, we can demonstrate at least from an economic point of view that there's when we do improvements in the indoor environment, there is improvements in academic learning and productivity. Is that still firmly believed? Does the research still support those statements?
Yeah, I think there has never been a study which disagreed with that. Let me put it that way. So you could have, like, depending on the task that someone is doing, the improvements would vary. Or at a certain point, then you don't get enough improvement in the performance for the investment that you have made. So that would be a plateauing out of the returns, which you would expect anyway. But there hasn't been a study which showed that, no, I improved thermal comfort or I improved the ventilation, and then people started walking less.
Problem is, right, thermal
good.
comfort is a really individual, subjective thing, right? If two people in a room and they're both having a different experience, right?
I mean, so that's something like I think Robert and I have discussed at length at some points about thermal comfort and typical standards like PMB, PPT that have been used to evaluate it. And as I mentioned, like, I did my PhD thesis on adaptive thermal comfort, which kind of firmly believes in this individualistic approach. And then, like, over the period, though, like, my understanding of the traditional PMB PPT approach that has also changed a bit, evolved a bit, I would say. So, like, the traditional approach that's used in this analytical thermal comfort for design purpose. So I guess, like, sometimes it's used in a way it's not supposed to. Like, that was not supposed to predict the thermal sensation of an individual or even of a group of persons. It was supposed to give you advice that, okay, if you keep the conditions that affect thermal comfort within this boundary, which is kind of a 6-7 dimensional space, if you keep them within this boundary, then you will end up with most people feeling comfortable. And that's what actually happens in most field situations. So, like, I have done a bunch of field studies. I've interacted with published research, 1,000+ feedbacks from people. So from that experience, I know that, like, if you design something to be within PMB, that ±0.5, and you take into account all the different parameters like clothing, activity rate, radiant temperature, air temperature, air movement, humidity, take all of them into account and manage to get it within that range, you should not have a big headache that there would be a bunch of complaints tomorrow because thermal comfort is an individually experienced aspect, and I don't know every individual in that space, so that's not going to happen. What often happens is that the implementation might be flawed, and Robert can speak more to this than me. And then sometimes there are like spaces change, or the user for space changes, and then people who are running the space, they might not take that into account. Like say it was designed for a purpose and now it's being used for a different purpose, then that's not really the fault of the designer, that you didn't tell him that in 2 months' time you're going to shift and like a cubicle-based office into an open plan office, or you're going to add in more walls, or like ceiling to floor walls. And those are the situations I see. Like, I agree with you, Adam, that the thermal comfort is quite, like, it's a personal aspect, and there are variations between the sexes. There's variation across cultural variations out there. But at the same time, it's still the same human body which evolved in the savannas of Africa, and we have been trying to stay indoors since then for as most of our life, like even starting from caves to this kind of apartments and big buildings these days. But it's still kind of the same human body, so it's not going to be that much of a difference. Like, and so I don't remember, like he got a Nobel Prize in economics, right? So he invented this term called satisficers. Like human beings are
satisficing.
Yeah.
Yes.
So human beings are not trying to optimize. I'm not trying to optimize my thermal comfort. My colleagues in the office are not trying to optimize that. I have to be at PMB 0 or absolute neutral, and only then I'll start to work. People are okay with good enough. And so that good enough, at least I believe that's a lot of overlap of the good enough band for people wherever you are from, global north, global south, from India, from UK, US, wherever. So
this is sort of like blessing and curse of ASHRAE 55, right? You're talking about satisfying most of the people, right? So from an engineering term, straight away, most is inaccurate. It's not measurable, right? Yeah. And it makes sense because if most of the people are happy, you're dealing with like evolution and dealing with sort of the typical person, and there's the outliers, right? Mm-hmm. But you know, us engineers, we do love to make things overcomplicated, and we have to measure everything, right? And that's one of the problems with it, right? I don't think ASHRAE 55 gets the respect it's due, because it looks a bit mushy and undefined sometimes, right? Yeah, there's that's a PR problem that someone like Don Draper in advertising needs to fix. But just on, so you're at the sort of...
Sorry, Adam, can I just interrupt you, because there's the discussion that we had that reminded me of an anecdote. So Robert, you know Michael Humphreys, right?
Yeah, I do, yeah.
So I was just having a chat with him, and he said of this. So she was like, this was in 80s, and he was working with a colleague from India. So this person from India, from one of the Indian universities, was visiting them, and he had been there for like a couple of weeks, and he had started adapting to the local tracing customs. And he told Michael that, see, I'm perfectly comfortable that I am from India. I'm normally used to a different climate, but I came here. It took me a couple of weeks to kind of understand like the tracing pattern and why people dress that way. And so, like, now I am dressed up in a proper like office suit, and now I'm comfortable in this place as well.
Yeah, and I'm so glad you're bringing all this up, because there is, and actually for our listeners, there was some terminology. We should actually go back and talk about that for just a second. So PMV, PPD, within the world of thermal comfort assessment, it's one of the fundamentals of ASHRAE 55. And so the PPD is the predicted percent of people dissatisfied. The PMV is the predicted mean vote. And it came about, these two indexes came about from work that Fangers and some of his colleagues developed looking at individuals. And this range that Asit talked about, 0 plus or minus 0.5. Basically, what it says is that if you get all the criteria of the standard, and you mentioned them, Asit, between the air temperature, radiant temperature, humidity, air velocity, and then even the local factors, you can toss them in there as well, that if you get everything right, either through the not either through, with architecture, enclosure, interior systems, and then the right mechanical system, that you have a high probability that there will be most of the people in the room will be happy, or they won't complain. And where the adaptive comes into play, because as it uses the term adaptive comfort, it's basically a methodology within the standard that says, okay, during some climate conditions, that you can engage in the outdoor world, bring the outdoor world into the indoor world, allow people to change their clothing, bring in, devices that can change their perception of the space. And so there's room within the standard that says we give the opportunity for people to have that. But that oftentimes is regulated by who their employer is, right? So anyways, we're getting into the weeds here. But one of the big debates is that people that don't understand the standard or don't understand the research work, they very much see it as an analog, but it's not an analog discussion. It's very fuzzy. If you look at the control logic, right? Analog logic versus fuzzy logic, it's very fuzzy and it's very gray. And if you can't work in the gray world, you're going to be frustrated with Standard 55, because we provide no limits in humidity. We provide no limits in drywall temperature. We provide, there's no limits. There's just ranges and combinations of ranges. It's like a Rubik's Cube. To get the solution for a building and a person within that building requires looking at the different aspects of the cube. And when you solve it, then people like that person. If there's several of them, then most of them won't complain about the environment. So, if there's a message out of this dialogue here that we're having, is that people need to understand it's not analog, it's fuzzy, there's a lot of gray, and there are no limits. But that's the beauty of it, because it very much represents people. People are not analog. We're all fuzzy, all gray. Every one of us is different. And so when you can learn to work with that, then you can see the power of vernacular architecture, how the building design itself, the geometry, its orientation, the colors, the window-to-wall ratios, the thermal performance of the building, the interior systems, when they're passively designed, then you can put fuzzy people inside, and the building solves a lot of those problems. And where the rub is, in my experience, is that we have mechanical people that are given the responsibility of fixing bad architecture and fixing bad enclosures and ignoring the power of interior systems. And so they try to solve it with their own biases. And while in North America, that bias is an air-based system, which drives Adams nuts, makes me go crazy, because a lot of the problems that we have in bad architecture is not convective-based, it's radiant-based. And if we actually solved the radiant problem with a radiant solution, we wouldn't have the crap that we have in buildings today. Anyways, that's just a diversion of the conversation we were having. I just wanted to stop you there because people needed to know where we sort of were at. So
the Edifice Complex will continue in just a moment.
Are you struggling with paperwork, spreadsheet overload, and project management? Then Blue Rhythm is the solution to help you. Streamline your commissioning and project management process. Go paperless, increase efficiency, and save money. Blue Rhythm is commissioning and project management software by practitioners for practitioners, adapting to your workflows and processes, and doing things your way. Blue Rhythm provides painless and fast onboarding by bringing your existing workflows, forms, checklists, and issues logs into Blue Rhythm for you. You can use their pre-built templates to customize your commissioning workflows. And Blue Rhythm can fully handle the transition from your current software platform. Blue Rhythm is secure, scalable, and reliable, backed by amazing support, and accessible 24/7 on any Windows, iOS, or Android device. Why are you still using paper and hard-to-control spreadsheets? Start your free Blue Rhythm account today at bluerhythm.com.
And now, back to the show.
So where is research trending towards now? What are you researching in this field?
So currently, in general, the research is like a lot of fields. There is examination of how do you use AI, big data, continuous monitoring to improve both the operation of buildings as well as feedback to their design process. there are a bunch of people like us who are looking at the human-centric angle in there. I guess, yeah, I still like to believe I'm an engineer, but I've been working with people for so much. And so there are also people who are looking at it from the lens of community-based participatory research, like working with people to understand what best works in their community, what best works for their homes. So these are a few ideas and approaches or directions that have been going on, which I personally like put in the top research efforts that are going on in the field right now.
So the output for obviously the output of your research is papers and thoughts and conclusions. Where does that go? Where do you direct that output to?
So right now, like I'm trying to see like, how do we get almost all research publications in an open access format. So
that's what needs to happen.
Good. Yeah.
And second is try to, like, once you publish something, have something simpler in a popular science publication like RT Brainstorm for Ireland or the Conversation, like we have a Conversation UK. So those kind of aspects are there. And then like try to link up somehow as a matter of policy to see. That's the tricky part, like if you can get in touch with the right people and make the right connections to see if they can influence policy somehow, like even in a small scale. Like people sometimes confuse policy with the parliaments and laws being passed, but
no, it's what goes on behind the scenes, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it could be something as simple as like you talk to the principal of a school and told them that you schedule your cleanings after the classes are done so that the children are not exposed to the chemicals from the cleaning products. So that's also, like, that sounds simple enough, but that's also a change in policy. That some things like that can be done.
I think one of the problems is you're in academia, right? And academia is a bit of a closed sphere. And one of the things I think is incumbent on people like yourself who actually do the research and publish research is to be more high profile, which is obviously not natural for an academic, but be more like promoting on LinkedIn. I've just done this paper, it's available here. You know, try and get like students and other people, practitioners interested in it, drive that attention to it. Because if the right practitioner with the right influence got hold of it, they could actually make stuff happen with that information, right? There's a bit of this silo thing going on.
Well, and that's going back to Asit, like what you were saying, publishing and open access documents.
Yeah.
For those that are listening and you're in academia, if you're listening to this podcast, I'll tell you this right now. I do not cite papers that I can't read for free.
Correct.
I don't do it. Yeah. And the reason is because these big publishing houses are making billions and billions of dollars, some of it off of public taxpayers' dollars. And if my tax dollars are going towards research work, because our government does research work and it's funded publicly through tax dollars, and I can't get access to that document, sorry, not going to cite it.
Yeah.
So the fact that you're moving towards that, and that's what I like about Berkeley. You know, Berkeley published all of their papers online. Publicly, you can get them. And then other places like ResearchGate, you know, where the authors will make it available as long as you're a member of ResearchGate, you can get the access. But these documents are behind paywalls. Yeah, what good is it doing? Like, when I was practicing, and if you want me to incorporate your information, then make the information available to me so that I can incorporate it. But if you hide it behind a paywall, like, I'm sorry, folks. Like, I'm not going to participate in that game. So, anyways, that's my soapbox. Another one.
Like talking to yourself, publishing it behind a paywall, right? I told myself so. I did.
And it's great because, for those that are doing research work and you're publishing documents behind paywalls, it's great when you're within your community. Oh, look at me, I did a paper.
Yeah.
And so you're right, Adam, like everybody's publishing it, and that's good, right?
But that's so what you're talking about there is status, right? In academia, there's a status about how many papers I've had published, right? And that's great and all good, but the public and society needs to benefit from that. And that status game doesn't benefit the public at all.
No. It sits in a digital library, and it'd be really interesting. Asit, maybe you know this. What, in terms of papers that are published and kept behind a paywall, versus papers that are open access, what is the ratio of reads? So if there's 1,000 people that want to read a subject matter, and that subject matter is behind a paywall and it's open access, what's the ratio?
I wouldn't have an exact number, but the ratio is very much in favor of open access.
Yeah.
So it could be something like 10-1 or more.
Right.
In terms of citations, the ratio would be closer, but still open access papers get cited more.
Yeah. Right. So I think, and so on this topic, because it is one of my, it happens. So I've written about this actually on LinkedIn, and I challenge academics. I think, like, I'm hugely supportive of research work, hands down. I think the world absolutely needs it. And I say that, and I use the word "but" deliberately, because the spread between what we apply and what we're learning is getting larger and larger and larger. And the world of knowledge is like the taillights of a car way off in the horizon, and it's disappearing. And so every time we publish something within a subject matter that doesn't get applied, right, it just means we have more and more knowledge and less people applying what we know. And so how do we there's a question for you. That's your world. So what do you think about that concept of we know more and more and more, but people are applying less and less and less because the knowledge bank keeps growing, but our application stays the same. So the spread gets bigger.
I think, we do need to do a better job of communicating with people and practitioners. So if it has to be like, I understand there are certain compulsions of why people cannot publish open access because there are fees involved, and sometimes people from different countries, different economic regions may not be able to afford it. Like, it could be a good work that gets accepted in a journal. So then we would have to look for alternatives. That you could always make a simple, a one-pager and state in general, even if it's a 10 pages or 12 pages journal article, there is probably one page which is the essence of it.
Right.
Put it out on LinkedIn, make a LinkedIn post, and the journals are not going to be able to stop you from doing that. So try to communicate better with both the public as well as the practitioners to get this going. And so, I think this was part of, so there is this course I'm doing currently, which is about teaching climate change, or preparing public health courses for climate change. So they're talking about how should courses related to public health teach about climate change and all. So one of the instructors was I think this was a case study. So they're talking about you would be able to do different approaches, but try this one. Make a list of all the things that you have done that have worked. Just sit down and try to make a list of things that have worked and try to present that to the people that you're trying to convince. Because often you would even forget that all the things that you have done, which have worked over the ages, because it's selective memory kind of stuff. Sometimes we selectively memorize things that didn't work. So if you make a list of things up, make a list of the success stories, it often can become easier to drive change or to drive opinion in a certain way. I think so that could be a good idea for academics as well. So like, okay, these are the things that we have researched over the last 3 decades, and this is what we have found, and this has gone into practice here and each other. So it's like kind of a self-promotion, a success story, but that would help others also understand that, okay, this is how things proceed. This is the kind of learning curve associated with it, or the time it takes for something to go from lab to practice, and then the benefits that are associated with it. But that can be done. So it's good for people to see that it can be done. It has been done, and when it has been done, it has resulted in something useful, something nice, something positive.
Well, the adaptive comfort method's a good example of what you just said. Like when you think about Dodire and Brager and Humphreys and Rofe and all these other people that goes back, I want to say like 20 years ago. Like I remember being in the 55 committee. Yeah, Bjarne might have even been chairing at the time. And Fenger was still alive.
Yeah.
But, like those are back in the early days, and it was introduced, and there was a lot of friction actually in the early days to the adaptive method. There were some very strong vocal voices against it, but it got in, and now it has utility. But it's also created challenges for us. And I'll give you like in Vancouver, it was in 2023, like 600 people died because of a heat spike. Those buildings, not because they followed the adaptive method, but the vernacular architecture at the time in Vancouver was natural ventilated buildings. That's because the climate promoted it. The climate enabled people to have a relationship by opening up the windows, dressing down lighter, staying hydrated, all of these things that we normally do. But when the heat spike hit, you could no longer open up the windows, and there was it's a very complex situation, but as a result, over 600 people died. Those were buildings that were designed for adaptive comfort. Right? So we can promote something. So going back to adaptive method 20 years ago, researchers suggest, okay, we should change or add something to the standard. So we add it to the standard, but then there's other consequences that we have to pay attention to. You build a building in a particular area, and then society moves around it. So now you've got security issues, you've got noise issues, you've got air pollution issues. So it's just not a matter of designing the building for adaptive comfort. You have to think about, well, what's it going to be like for those people in that building, not today, but in 5, 10, or 50 years from now, will we be able to actually use adaptive philosophies within that building? So I think the mixed mode world needs to be promoted. Promote the adaptive method, but promote mixed mode where you have both mechanical conditioned spaces, but also be able to open up to the outside world.
I think like something that designers, policymakers, people living in spaces need to take into consideration is that the adaptive method does not exist in a vacuum. Like you need two things for it. You need people who are able to make adaptations, and you need the opportunity to be like the avenues to make some adaptation. So if those are not available, and like let's say if you are an elderly person in Vancouver, even if the building was designed for adaptive thermal comfort and he is, let's say, in his 80s and he's too dehydrated to make a change, you need actors and you need avenues. And what kind of change can he make? And why can't an air conditioner be part of these adaptive actions? Because it's too hot. So this is one of the reasons, I think I had mentioned this to you during our chats in Montreal, that this is one of the reasons why I insisted that my parents, like, okay, Indians of a certain age group of that generation, they are kind of stoics. They kind of take pleasure in being able to bear the heat. But I said, okay, you are getting on age. You are getting an air conditioner. I don't really care what you want. You may not use it for most of the year, but there will be like 2 or 3 days during the year when the mercury is going to be, it's not even that it's touching 45. It used to touch 45 when I was 10. That's not the biggest challenge. It's like it's going to stay, the maximum temperature is going to stay over 40 for more than 30 days, more than 40 days now.
Oh, yeah.
So that's a different thing that you're trying to do. So there will be days when people who are over 60, they need some extra adaptive opportunities, let's say, like discover
Adam,
them
that would be you and I.
Yep.
Sorry.
Yeah.
That's old folks.
That's all right, man. Don't worry, we're not upset. Keep going.
But you're right, and so again, like for our listeners, you know, we make an assumption that people are able to adapt, and I think it was in 2013, I did a presentation for the Healthy Building America conference in Boulder, Colorado, and my intention of that presentation was to draw attention to the segment of the population that have multiple sclerosis or Parkinson's disease or Raynaud's disease. So their bodies, physiologically couldn't put themselves into homeostatic states, or they physically couldn't adapt to the environments, and that these caused stress. And we can't forget that. And, you know, you made the statement earlier about buildings changing purpose, you know, where you design a building for a specific purpose and then it gets repurposed for some other application. And that applies to all buildings, not just commercial spaces, but residential buildings as well. You could take a building on a continuum, you know, that was built 50 years ago. Well, today it's being, you know, some other application. So our systems that we design to meet the codes of those days may not be the systems that we need today for the purpose of that building. And I think people forget about that. Both of those, that they forget about who's in the building and what are they trying to, what's the space, what's the conditions they want to control, and what's within their control to control those spaces. I think we forget about that.
Yeah, sometimes it's an easy mistake to make, but I guess like, I mean, I think Joe Allen says this frequently, that a building designer or the building operator has more impact on people's health has more impact on your health than your doctor. So we would have to take that responsibility.
This is about, you talk about lifestyle, right? But you are actually in control of how you design your lifestyle, right? The house you choose, do you choose to have AC, or are you going to be stoic and just stare it out, you know? It's like
stare down that 45C.
Yeah.
What is that in Fahrenheit anyway? That's got to be pushing 100 and...
Oh yeah, 45. That's serious. I've experienced
5.
52 in Riyadh, and that is like, that's uncomfortable, man. That's really uncomfortable. You know?
So what is that in Fahrenheit?
Oh, that's well over
110,
110, 115.
110, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, 110 degrees Fahrenheit. I remember being in Dubai, and we thought we would be, you know, smart and get up early to avoid the crowds. Nobody was around. It was like 9 in the morning or 8 in the morning, and
the humidity is crushing, right?
Well, we were the stupid ones because we were walking around. It was like a Hollywood set. Like, where is everybody? Everybody's inside, Robert, hiding from the heat.
Yeah. There's 4 months a year in a Gulf where everyone just lives inside. You can stay at the Four Seasons Hotel in Bahrain, which is bougie beyond bougie, for 150 US a night in the summer, because it is so goddamn hot. No one goes there. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Anyway, listen, we are coming up on time, so we've just got one question each for you, right? And a quick fire one, right? So, fast forward 5 years. What do you think you'll be researching in 5 years' time?
I think I would be like, over the next 5 years, at least the plan or the current plan is to continue on this human-centric idea of comfort and equality in, let's say, indoor climate, and how do we go towards better methods of assessing the exposure. So, and from there on, going to, like, it's the idea that we're working on is about like, the comfort or with the thermal environment or with air quality is let's treat it like any other exposure. So like, let's say you have exposure to particulate matter and you say that, okay, that is a certain, or below this levels, it's good, over that levels, it's bad, because we have a clear health related demarcator there. But here also you have an aspect of well-being involved. So it's kind of going to be the challenge to move from, like, create a continuum of well-being and health. And so hopefully that also drives the idea that this is something essential for health, for public health. And in addition to the economic benefits of having better performing people at your office spaces, it's also good for overall investment. That's how we keep our population healthy and out of hospitals. So hopefully that's another argument to drive for this kind of, as we are discussing, either the grassroots level change or the top-down level change, to make sure that you have these things in building codes.
Okay. My request then is that you be more aggressive and assertive in pushing the results out there and communicating into the wider community. Do not live in a vacuum, my friend. There's no way to live.
Get out there, get your boxing gloves on. So that's it. My question actually is related to our study or lack of study of children and the elderly. So if you were to put yourself 5 years into the future and we were studying children and we were studying the elderly, what did we learn from that research work that we can apply to the general population, knowing what we know about kids and our parents?
I think in a certain way, it comes down to what we're discussing about, like thermal comfort being something personal, or that being adaptive thermal comfort and adaptive opportunities. But so there will be certain populations which we will always have to treat as vulnerable, and there are certain limitations on how they can impact changes in their environment, and so that should also partly drive the design. And when it may not just be limited to these age groups that we just discussed, but it could be more. So like this was something that I have been thinking sometimes on and off. Like, so you have occupants in a space. We frequently talk in terms of occupants. And then there are users of that space. Like in a classroom, I would believe that the teacher is the user of the space. So the teacher has some independence in regards to like setting the thermostat or maybe opening a window. And then you have occupants who are the children. The occupants may not necessarily be users of the space. Similarly, like for the elderly, then again, like if there is a caretaker, if they are aging in place, they are at home, but still maybe there is a caretaker who takes like handles all those things for their home. So that's the user. And then there could be a difference between what the user feels is appropriate and what the occupant actually needs. So that's kind of a conflict that we'll have to work around. But that's also true for what we have seen in office spaces. And this goes to the debate of gender and thermal comfort. Like you have a certain person who's the user, like the top boss, who is dressed in a three-piece suit, and he's detecting the thermal comfort requirements of others in the office who might be dressed in a lighter clothing or just top and skirt. So that's also for the origin story of the gender gap in thermal comfort. So that could be kind of what we learn from this two extreme age groups. And then when we try to apply that understanding and that empathy, that I hope, like one of the things that we earn from researching the specific vulnerable groups is empathy towards the users and occupants of buildings that we're going to design. So and that we try to apply in how we design the buildings of the future.
Yeah, thanks for that answer. I guess on my peripheral radar screen, I've used the word users and occupants before, but never understood it the way that you've just put it. That's a great way of looking at buildings, because it does explain some of the hierarchical conflicts that occur, between occupants and the users, and those that dictate space conditions really with a negative impact on the occupants.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes it could be with the best of intentions as well, like because they feel they know better, or they feel that this is something they should decide for all the users and all the occupants in the space.
But when I think about Japan, right, and their policy, when they change clothing policy, or they encouraged, that was basically a removal of the hierarchy, or it made the user and the occupants on a sort of a more even playing field by saying, we encourage you to change your clothing policies. We encourage you to provide some homogeneous clo value between the different genders. And by doing so, then the experience of the user and the occupants were more harmonious, and they allowed the temperature to rise in the space, which reduced the energy cost. So they solved two problems, the energy problem and the thermal comfort conflicts that occurred by just enabling people to change their clothing policy.
And you can expect that only from Japan, where they have a policy and the minister comes in with like short sleeves shirt and light trousers to his office, and then okay, if the minister comes in, then that's an inspiration. That's something that everyone can follow.
Yeah.
I don't believe okay, there are liberal governments around the world in many countries. I have lived in a bunch of those countries, but I don't believe any other country would be able to do that.
Yeah. Well, Adam, and you, because you travel in a lot of countries around the world, and particularly in the Middle East, that the clothing that they wear, like I know when I was in Oman and the UAE, that like I wanted to wear what the locals were wearing. Because there's a reason for that, right? Here I am in Western garb. I got a jacket on, and it's just like, hang on a second here.
If you're outside, the local clothing in the UAE is the right thing, but most people live inside in air-conditioned spaces that are 21 degrees C at 55% RH.
Yeah.
So you wind up, actually, I've done this in the middle of summer in UAE. You get cold during the day and you walk outside to warm up.
Right.
That's called
I've done the same thing in Singapore.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're sitting here thinking, what is going on? I'm short the bone. You walk out, 10 minutes, cup of coffee, you're great, straight back in.
Well, and that's that whole term anesthesia, right?
Yeah.
That Richard Didier, Dr. Didier has been writing about, talking about for a long, long time. And there is like, I understand that whole thing. The body always tries to go back to a homeostatic state because that's how we're programmed, right? So it's always going to be adjusting blood pressures and flow and moisture to try to maintain a thermal homeostatic state. But the whole anesthesia is about experiencing non-homeostatic states. It's like when you do get cold or you do get hot, and then there's a change and there's this, that just feels so good until it doesn't.
Listen, if you're in UAE and you're running a big office and you're the FM person, set the space temperature to 24.5 degrees C, 60% RH. Everyone will be super comfortable. No one will notice. And you'll save a ton of energy.
Yeah. Right.
An extreme version of this, I've seen this in India. So the cooling is a status symbol. I guess that's the
yes, that is exactly what's going on.
Middle East.
Yeah.
So I moved from kind of supermarket, so that's considered to be for everyday people. So based on experience, I would say the temperature was around 24 degrees. Moved to a slightly higher, higher middle income group supermarket. In temperature comes down to 22. Moves to Mark and Spencer. So Mark and Spencer in India is kind of the top bracket.
Oh yeah, no, I know exactly what you're talking about.
So 20 degrees, 19 degrees, 20 degrees.
Yeah. It's a status symbol. That's really what's going on in the UAE, right? Particularly in the early 80s, the status symbol was an air-conditioned glass office. And it's not really culturally moved away from that in all that time, right? That's a problem. But this is why I'm a big fan of price as a signal, right? Because in the Middle East, energy is cheap. So there's no signal that you should be cutting back. Right? Do I want it? Yes or no? But the delta between 21 degrees C and 24.5 degrees C, that is a delta that is available to everyone at no real cost, other than doing it, right? But the UAE is moving over to nuclear power over time, so then it'll be a green energy place, right? And the cost of energy will still be cheap. So unless that requirement comes in the form of a building regulation or code, it's not going to happen.
But to some degree, they've created their own box to play in by the architecture that they've chosen, right? So that all those buildings, I mean, you go into the UAE and Dubai, and you look at the architecture and you go, well, okay, if they don't solve this energy problem with something like nuclear or solar, if their energy costs go up, they're screwed. So they have to, to some extent, they've created this own box. They have to create a solution for it, right?
Oh, the solution is nuclear, man, 100%. That's what's going on.
Yeah, right. So we had Holly Chant on, remember?
Yeah.
And she was talking about, because she was part of a all-female architectural engineering firm, right? If I remember correctly.
Department. Yeah, she was at KO. Yeah, she was the lead, but it was mostly female department.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that really triggered, and you might appreciate this, Asit, is that in the beginning of the time of development of Dubai, and Adam, you would know this more than anybody else, that the Western influence of architecture was massive, right? But then over time, I think Holly said that the local community started to realize that we shouldn't abandon our vernacular architecture. And I remember being walking down a beach by the airport, where they do the skydiving, right off the marina there.
Yeah.
And you can walk down and you can see all of these sort of Western influenced buildings, but amongst all of that is more traditional buildings. So if you look at the vernacular architecture, small windows, setback, more cream-colored buildings, as opposed to the Western influence, which were all glass, dark colors, like they were just solar absorbers,
If you go to Saudi Arabia, one of the big projects in the capital there is called Diriyah Gate, or Diriyah, right? It's all called Najdi architecture. It's the local vernacular, reinvented. So on the outside, it looks traditional, but on the inside, it's sort of like high tech, right? But the biggest influence on early design in the Gulf in the early 80s was the TV show Dallas. So the opening of that show was glass towers in Dallas. It's an oil town. And everyone went, you know what? That's us. We want that. Bring that here. That's exactly what happened, right? And that went on for like 10 years.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's my observation looking back as a somewhat older man. Anyway, listen, we need to wrap up. Listen, I said thank you for coming on. That was really interesting.
Yeah, thank you.
I want you to be an aggressive, communicator of your research. That's what's missing.
Thanks, Paul.
Okay, man. Thanks for coming on. Thank you.
Thank you.
The Edifice Complex will continue in just a moment.
Are you passionate about the built environment? Do you want to learn from the industry's most inspiring, intelligent, and accomplished professionals? Then the companion to this podcast, Wisdom of the Property Crowd, is just the book for you. From Edifice Complex podcast interviews, this book distills the critical thinking, insight, and ideas of some of the property industry's most accomplished and respected practitioners. Each chapter is a synopsis of an hour-plus interview, capturing the takeaways and insights, including diagrams and images, to help explain concepts and ideas. There's also a brief bio about the interviewee and a QR code linked to the podcast episode for those that want to explore further. These are the mentors you wish you had in college. Wisdom of the Property Crowd by Adam Muggleton, available on Amazon worldwide.
And now, back to the show.
I'm glad we had Asit on, and I mean he's got a great story to tell as a parallel path of his academics. I mean, coming from another country, getting your first degree, coming to America, so just getting up and moving to another country. Again, another lesson for our listeners: if you're in school, don't be afraid. The fear is overcome the fear, move and experience something different. So he did that. And then went and got his doctorate degree, and now is living in another country. So he's been around. Like, he's been to different universities and technologies doing research work. So that says something about him right there. You're
right there, right? Because look, he's clearly an introvert and an academic, right? Yet, as my old professor used to say to me, are you going to be serfs or are you going to get out there and do something? It was what he challenged us with, right? The serfs don't leave the village. You've got to leave the village.
You got to leave the village. You really do. You have to leave the village. And
he did that, right?
Yeah.
So
he did that.
For him, man. Right? Obviously, he went across oceans to do it. He's obviously still Indian. He's still in touch with his mum and dad. You can still do all that.
Yeah.
FaceTime, right? We live in a world now where you can speak to someone on the other side of the world pretty much for free.
Yep. Right. And for as long as you want.
As long as you want. Your mum wants an hour of your time, you can actually give it to her, right?
Yeah.
You know, so there's that.
Yeah.
You know, so that works. But that whole academics are necessary, right? They're not necessarily evil, they're necessary. Someone has to do the deep thinking and look forward and move the state of the art of science forward, right?
Yeah.
My big problem with it is a lot of it's done in a vacuum and no one knows about it.
Yeah.
It's a bit like me patting myself on the back for a great day's work. You know, good job, Aaron. Well done. No one knows, right?
Yeah. And that's so when he said he was doing, or he's trying to publish in more open access stuff, like inside, I was cheering him on because, like, again, like people, like if you're doing research work and nobody knows about it, it's like winking at a girl in the dark. You winked. She doesn't though.
Yeah, look, research work that no one reads is like your mum putting that picture up you did in 5th grade on the refrigerator door, right?
Right.
That's what's going on there.
Yeah, and that's why like the universities like, the Berkeley have really carved a path in the world of academia because all of their stuff is online. You can read it. It's there. ASU was like that too. I haven't been to the ASU websites these days, but when Dr. Shetsley was there and your buddy Marcus there, our friend there, by the way, there's a guy that's got tons of passion.
Oh, God, he's so much passion. He's a regulator on it, right?
Anyways, going back to academics and publishing and universities, the universities that make that information available just have a different place in the world of the eyes of the practitioner. Guys like you, guys like me, when we went through our career, if we needed to figure something out and the world of academia had it, we went to the places where it was free.
Look, ASU, Berkeley, again, universities, they're all over the show, right? Some are good, like Berkeley obviously is expensive, but it means something, right? That they're comfortable and confident enough to publish their research, right? Now, all right, Berkeley are, I suppose, Ivy, right? ASU is not Ivy, right? Yet they're comfortable and accessible and approachable, right? Yeah. So there's two ends of a spectrum there that's working. Why can't more universities be like that? I just do not understand.
Especially right now, like in this day and age where, man, we need that information and we need society to have access to them and politicians and policymakers. Like they need to see this stuff. Well, if it's hidden behind a paywall, then you know what? It's not so much the money, it's the principle behind it for me. And it's the hoops you got to jump through. Like you go to Elsevier, and I'm going to point those guys up because they make billions of dollars off the backs of others. You go to the website, you read like Asit said, like you get the 1-page synopsis, and then it's like you can access this full document through your institution. What institution? Like I'm not an institution. I don't belong to an institution. I'm just a schmuck, right? That needs to access this information. And then if you can't get it through your institution, then it's going to cost you $45 or whatever they're charging these days for papers. Yeah, I'm sorry.
No. You need to crowdsource, right? If you want progress, there's a lot of brain power out there. You need to crowdsource that.
Yeah.
Right. There is wisdom in the crowd, and there are stars hiding in plain sight that no one knows about because they can't get access to things, right?
Yeah, totally.
But access actually is an issue. It really is because it's a form of segregation in a way, right? Academic segregation.
You're right. Absolutely.
Yeah, and we've all decided that's no good, but we're not calling it out in certain places. And academia is deep in the segregation.
Adam, that's a great point. Everybody's talking about integration and collaboration and all these buzzwords, which are good words, but if the research is hidden behind a paywall, that is segregation. That is
absolutely, man. I don't know, but it's gross and it needs to change. But the other thing I want to talk about quickly was ASHRAE 55. It really struck me that, I think one of the reasons it's not embraced so much because it is a bit like unbound, using words like most and like mean predictive, It's anti-engineering in a way.
Well, people think of it as an HVAC design standard, but it's not. It's an architectural
no.
standard. Yeah.
I mean, I'm only sort of reasonably okay with it and understand it because of you, right? Otherwise, you might think, well, I don't want to.
Yeah. Well, and that's one of the things I like about Asit is I very much I'm on board with his philosophy of the PPD, PMV, and there is a group of people out there that are attacking it, and it's been a sustained attack.
Yeah.
And they come at it, oh, it doesn't work, or it's gender biased, or blah blah blah, and then no, the whole, if you go back into the history of it, when you design within this 0 plus or minus 0.5, which is what it's all about, and it gives you the ability to adapt, that's where you want to be, right? So, but attacking your former colleagues is a rite of passage in academia, right? That's what it's all about. And no, it's
that's
all
sort of like fighting over who's the tallest midget, right? Life's difficult enough. Why do people have to fight each other when they're in the same gang? I have no idea.
Right? Yeah, it's right. We see, doesn't work. Yeah, it's just, it's not good. So when he talked about the PMV, PPD, but also adaptive comfort, that when you can work in this world of gray, you'll achieve the compliance with the standard. You don't have to get so analog about the whole thing. It's not an analog thing at all.
But what I take away from this, because I've never really I don't think about academia a lot because I'm still angry about having to put my kids through university. I'm still not over that, and I never will be. But, academia and the university system in general needs to freaking change, right? It is segregated. Look, my daughter is half Chinese, half white. She's American. If she applies to Harvard, that's like having leprosy and herpes. No way are you getting in there, right? Because there is positive discrimination against Asian people and now discrimination against white people. So what is the point for her, right? That makes me sad for her, right? But that aside, there's also segregation in access to information and knowledge. And they're just horrible places, right? Why does no one call them out?
Yeah.
Why do we accept this bullshit? Why do we pay them money? Again, still not over the costs you should take away from this conversation. Still not.
Yeah, well, I don't know what the endowment funds that the Harvards of the world or the Whartons of the world are sitting on, but it's big
You could float a freaking First World Navy on the bleeding endowment fund of Harvard or someone like that. You could pay for 35 aircraft carriers a week. You know what I mean? They should not be getting public money if they got that much endowment.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm not American, so it's not my fight. But just academia in general is, I think, actually got too comfy and society moved on and they have not adapted, actually, in my opinion.
Yeah, that applies to businesses too, right?
Yeah.
Old traditional businesses, the status quo runs deep in their veins, and getting that to change. You think of some of the old law firms.
Right? Oh yeah, but the difference is, right, in business, you live or die, right, by your actions.
Yeah.
Universities are subsidized by taxpayers, which is me last time I checked. Still not over that either. And, it's a problem for me. I'm propping up a bullshit system that doesn't work very well. And that is not, and I've got no recourse to change that. I haven't even got an avenue to complain about it.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, and I think for sure the universities are under attack. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah.
And part of that is just a response, society's response to watching these old ships, continue down and navigating the old ways. But the world has changed so fast. When you think about, who was the young kid, mathematician that made all of his stuff available free online? I can't
remember. That was a gangster move. I remember.
It was a total gangster move. And now he's got online colleges and what the, what was his name? Anyways, there was a guy that just said, this, I have a whole bunch of knowledge and I can make it available to free and I can teach kids mathematic principles at whatever level they want to learn at and
Yeah.
make it really simple for them, right? And I thought, like,
That is what you need more of. If you actually believe in progress, that's what you got to do. You got to democratize that information and knowledge.
yeah,
Right. But yeah, universities, particularly the Ivies and the Oxfords and Cambridge, they've been put on this pedestal and they love it up there. They have no interest in stepping off that even for a minute, you know. And I don't know. I mean, I'm not one for like pitchforks and you know, and kill them. But somewhat, just from the funding, Ivies do not need funding with public funds. That would be my thing. King of America and UK, take that away. You know, if you're an Ivy with an endowment fund of a certain level, good luck, have a nice day. You know, we're putting that money into like other colleges and universities.
yeah.
And
We've had, you know, like Joe Stieberg on, right? So
Yeah.
there's a guy that's, you know, has some roots in academia, but he's at the end of the day, he's a practitioner. He's, you know, he's out in the real world working. And we've had, you know, other people that are like that too online, you know, that had academic backgrounds but got out into the real world. Bill Bonfils is another one, right, where he has practical experience. And there is a difference between an academic that has scars,
yes,
field scars, than
I look at Bill as a practitioner who teaches.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's exactly what he is. Yeah.
Yeah. And, you know, I've never heard of anyone shit talk Penn State or his course. Not once, right?
Yeah, me neither.
Value there, right? They don't understand it, but that's what they're getting. They're getting real usable knowledge, right?
Yeah.
But why is Penn State not funded at the expense of one of these other bullshit ones like Harvard?
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, no, that's me. But listen, the other thing that props this up while I'm fucking ranting is alumni that starts.
We did introduce you as the agitator, right?
Yeah. Why do alumni, and this is pretty much a North American phenomenon, send thousands and millions of dollars to their old colleges? What is that about?
Yeah.
NYU asked me for money after Emily graduated. I phoned her and said, "Don't you ever send me that letter again." I would happily see that place burnt to the ground.
Yeah.
But people do it. It's like Stockholm syndrome. It's
Right.
Right? It's like Scientology.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ, you've got to stop that. Anyway, I don't get it. You've got to be out of your goddamn mind if you're sending money to your university like that. Anyway, that's me. Angry.
And on that note,
have a nice weekend, everybody.
all right, Adam.
See you later.
See ya. Bye.
You've been listening to the Edifice Complex podcast with Adam Muggleton and Robert Bean. See you next time.